This wild and desolate Pacific coastline in northern Chile harbors an ancient mystery. From the dry landscape emerges a horde of mummies, bodies preserved by morticians 6,000 years ago. Remarkably, many are babies, some just fetuses.
I have been always wondering, why do they have this need to mummify fetuses, to mummify newborns?
Archaeologists are intrigued by the high proportion of infants among the dead. Is this evidence of a crude form of population control? Infanticide? New research into toxins in the environment offers an alternative: mass poisoning through arsenic. Will an investigation into this modern threat to the local inhabitants solve the ancient mystery of Chile's child mummies? The Atacama Desert stretches along the Pacific coastline of South America. The rain never falls here, but rivers cutting through the lunar landscape bring water from the high-altitude mountains of the Andes. They may also be carrying a deadly cargo, the lethal poison, arsenic. In northern Chile, the local inhabitants are struggling to subsist in this harsh environment, and many may have been unwittingly ingesting this naturally occurring but highly toxic metal. Recent research is revealing a worldwide epidemic of arsenic poisoning in areas with contaminated groundwater. Over 130 million people are affected in 70 countries worldwide. Symptoms range from painful skin lesions to cancer, organ failure, and death. A team from the local University of Tarapacá have arrived in this desolate wasteland to measure the extent of the problem, but they must also find a solution. Joining them is Professor of Physical Anthropology, Bernardo Arriaza. He's hoping this modern research can also shed light on an ancient mystery, one that has its origins 6,000 years ago. In 1983, he was part of a team that uncovered a site containing the world's oldest examples of human mummification. A horde of 96 bodies emerged from an ancient cemetery.
This time was very intriguing and very impressive to see all these mummies coming out of the ground.
But one question has always puzzled him. Why did they find so many newborn children and even fetuses among the dead? The mummies were found in the harbor town of Arica, near the border with Peru. They are now stored in the University of Tarapacá's Archaeology Museum, where Professor Arriaza has his laboratory base. The shelves here are full of human remains found in the area over the years.
The University of Tarapacá, and we have thousands of specimens from prehistoric time to historical times. Here are different skulls, and in this room at the end, we have the heads of people that were naturally mummified.
The natural mummification of these bodies occurs because of the area's desert climate. This is one of the driest places on the planet. The nitrates present in the sandy soil absorb body fluids and prevent attack by bacteria, so internal organs and even facial features remain largely intact. But examination of the newly discovered bodies revealed that ancient morticians had been at work to ensure a different type of preservation: artificial mummification. So who were these mysterious people? Radiocarbon dating placed the oldest remains at about 4000 BC. At the time, the area was inhabited by a simple hunter-gatherer people named the Chinchorro by archaeologists. A string of small settlements have been found along a narrow 550-mile strip of coast to the north and south of Arica. Basic fishing tools found during excavations indicate they lived primarily off the sea, hunting for sea lions and collecting shellfish. Further analysis of the mummy population produced a fresh mystery. Of the 96 bodies found, 42 were children and 23 were under the age of 1. The high body count among the young led some to believe the mummies held a dark secret. Were the Chinchorro murdering their young? Was this evidence of infanticide?
Some cultures practice infanticide as a way to have population control. Sometimes they prefer one gender over another one, male versus female, or sometimes those children that are weak, they tend to be eliminated from the population.
The infanticide theory was intriguing, but it had one major flaw. As well as newborn babies, the team also discovered a number of tiny fetuses, perhaps proof that the high rate of infant mortality was beyond human control.
Here we have a remain of a Chinchorro fetus, and it's quite intriguing that she was mummified in the same way that they did it for adults.
The tiny fetus was encased in clay, with a simple face drawn on top, and a section of human hair placed on the head.
And also we can see the tiny, tiny bones, so telling us that this is a human fetus.
Using X-rays, Professor Ariaza was able to determine that more items, previously thought to be clay statuettes, in fact, contained tiny fetuses.
Spine is really there, and then we move down, we can see the legs, the femur, and the tibia, and the feet.
Bernardo believes the unusual numbers of mummified fetuses and babies is evidence of a high rate of miscarriage and infant mortality among the Chinchorro people. But what could have caused such a traumatic loss of life? Bernardo is embarking on a journey to investigate his new theory, that the Chinchorro mothers were being unwittingly poisoned. He's heading into the traumatic landscape of the Atacama Desert, which he believes may conceal vital clues. 60 miles south of Arica lies the Camarones River. Its precipitous valley runs from the high-altitude plains down to the Pacific Ocean. But these peaceful waters may hide a dark secret. Scientists believe they are contaminated by the deadly toxin arsenic. Recent research into modern cases of arsenic poisoning has revealed a link to high levels of miscarriage, stillbirths, and infant mortality. Could this explain the deaths of so many children thousands of years ago? In search of scientific evidence to support this theory, Bernardo has joined a research team from Arica's Tarapacá University, who are gathering data about levels of arsenic in the area.
Here we're in the Camarones Valley, and we have been collecting water, plants, reeds, and soils because we want to know how much arsenic is in this region and also how much arsenic was concentrated in the plants. So here we have a totora reed. You can see it's very flat, but as we move down to the roots, we can see that some of these roots are more softer, and most likely the Chinchorro were eating these remains. So this is what we want to test. Also in the lab, we want to see how much arsenic was in these remains.
Each sample is carefully logged and labeled, and its precise location pinpointed on a handheld GPS.
98. We are doing this because this is the environment where the Chinchorro used to live, and we want to know how much the environment was affecting their health. Humedad relativa, 39%. So if we find a lot of arsenic in the river and in the plants, then we have a good case, I think, that the same thing was happening thousands of years ago. And the Chinchorros were being very affected by this toxic, very toxic metal.
All the samples will be taken back to the lab for analysis. But Bernardo is also interested in tracking whether the local population is being affected by arsenic today. So he's visiting the village of Camarones, halfway up the valley. His arrival coincides with a fiesta to celebrate Chilean Independence Day. Locals from miles around have gathered to take part in a day of parades, music, dancing, and eating. Bernardo is here to meet Marco Garrido, director of the local health clinic, who has helped to deliver many of the children here today. He wants to find out if the women are experiencing any problems during pregnancy that could be caused by arsenic poisoning. Marco is happy to report that recorded rates of stillbirths and miscarriages are no higher than normal, but he also reveals that these villagers no longer drink the local water.
Hace 10 años esta comuna, principalmente este poblado.
For almost 10 years, this community and this village in particular has been supplied with drinking water by tanker from the town of Arica. A week ago, they got tap water.
Oh, very good. Yeah. Muy bien.
The older members of the village didn't have the benefit of these uncontaminated water supplies earlier in their lives. Marco takes Bernardo to visit Inez and Michaela, who are both in their 70s. On their skin are small white blotches, telltale signs of arsenic poisoning. To measure how much arsenic they have in their system, Bernardo takes a sample of hair. A single strand contains valuable information about a person's diet. Any arsenic absorbed into the body will also be present in the hair. Bernardo is hoping the hair found with the Chinchorro mummies also holds information on arsenic content.
We're going to be testing the modern sample and the ancient sample for arsenic to see how much it was there, and also to see if we can build a good correlation between what we see in the hair and what we see in the body.
Bernardo and the team are leaving the Camarones Valley and heading back to begin their scientific analysis. Meanwhile, the modern and ancient hair samples are sent on a 4,000-mile journey north to Massachusetts in the USA. 75 miles west of Boston is the town of Amherst, where the rain definitely does fall. Here in the chemistry department of Hampshire College, the strands of hair are being analyzed by a high-tech instrument using a method that's only recently been developed. Conducting the cutting-edge experiment is Professor Dula Amarasiriwardena. He's a specialist in measuring toxic substances in the hard tissues of the human body, teeth, bones, and hair.
We are very excited about this opportunity and apply our methods to this archaeological material.
Using laser technology, he burns off a section of the hair's surface. A burst of argon gas blows the resulting particles into a mass spectrometer. This sorts the different elements according to their different masses. If there's any arsenic in the hair, the mass spectrometer will find it.
You see a rise in signal that then demonstrates there's arsenic in your sample.
The tests on the samples will take some time for Dula and his student research team to complete. Meanwhile, Bernardo is investigating a second mystery. What inspired the simple hunter-gathering Chinchorro people to begin preserving the bodies of their dead 2,000 years before the more sophisticated Egyptians? The bodies themselves show evidence of a complex and time-consuming process.
Here we have a few Chinchorro remains, and in this particular case we have some of the small details of how the mummies were being prepared. Here is the face of an individual. You can see a clay mask.
The mask has been painted black and modeled to represent the face. On the skull beneath the clay is evidence of a strange operation.
You can see clearly that those remains were cut. And they cut the skull to separate it in order to remove the brain and also try to reshape it again as it was in life.
The Chinchorro morticians then repacked the cranial cavity with reeds and clay and tied it back together along the jawbone. But they didn't just stop at the head. they undertook a skillful dismemberment of the whole body. The organs were removed and the limbs defleshed. Sticks were inserted to support the spine, arms, and legs, which were wrapped in reeds before being smothered in a layer of clay. They might also add a layer of human skin, and on the face, a clay mask, often with eyes and mouth open, as if still alive. Finally came a wig of human hair and a coat of paint. Some of the mummies showed signs of being repainted at a much later date. For Bernardo, this points to a strange custom. It seems these mummies weren't buried immediately, but were kept above ground alongside the living.
I think the chinchorros were most likely keeping the mummies around them, perhaps as a way of reflecting their love for the dead, because they put a lot of energy in preparing the bodies, in painting the bodies, you know.
The morticians' painstaking work on the corpses was to prepare them for display.
They were transforming their love into pieces of art. And now the flesh that would normally be decomposing and smelly and rotten, it was transforming something more pleasant to the eyes.
Eventually, the mummies were buried in an ancient cemetery where they remained sealed in time until their chance discovery thousands of years later. Analysis of these cemetery populations revealed some major differences to other mummifying cultures. First, the practice was not reserved for a wealthy elite. These were all ordinary members of a simple society. But the second major surprise was the attention paid to newborn babies and fetuses.
I have been always wondering, why do they have this need to mummify fetuses, to mummify newborns? Universally, people tend to have empathy for their children, they feel the love for their children, but sometimes some culture will separate what is a person and what is not a person. And in many societies, you become a person after you have fulfilled a particular rite.
With no such rite of passage, stillborn babies in most ancient cultures were not recognized as members of society, so were not given a full funeral rite. This simple hunter-gatherer people apparently had no such distinctions. What's more surprising, according to Bernardo's findings, artificial mummification by the chinchorro may have begun with children, and in the same place where Bernardo has been testing for arsenic, the Camerones Valley. The crucial evidence emerged when Bernardo and his fellow archaeologists were excavating at the point where the river runs into the Pacific Ocean. They discovered two cemeteries containing a mix of adults and children, many just newborn. But here, there was a major distinction. The adult bodies had been left to mummify naturally, but all the children had been artificially preserved. Carbon dating showed these were the earliest mummies yet, 1,000 years older than the Eureka find. For Bernardo, this evidence suggests that the artificial preservation of bodies began in the Camerones Valley, and it began with children.
In this case, it's so intriguing that even fetuses were being prepared and mummified, so that's really, really unique.
Was the traumatic loss of young life, perhaps caused by arsenic poisoning, the trigger for chinchorro mummification, which only later was practiced on adults as well? Was this an attempt by a grief-stricken society to cheat death and keep their babies and fetuses alongside them in the world of the living? The conclusive proof to support this theory may soon emerge. At the chemistry department in the University of Tarapacá in Arica, Hugo Lienqueo is testing the samples taken from the Camerones Valley. He begins with a small tub of soil, placing it in a powerful X-ray machine. The X-rays cause the different elements contained in the soil to evaporate one by one, allowing the levels of each element to be measured. Bernardo has arrived to hear the results of the tests. He's accompanied by Professor of Chemistry, Lorena Cornejo, who is leading the research program into levels of arsenic across this area of northern Chile. The soil and plant samples all show the presence of arsenic, but it's the water that produces the most worrying results.
We discovered that there were 1,000 micrograms, or 1 milligram of arsenic per liter, in Camarones village. Further upstream in La Pata, it was 1.3. And up in the mountains, on one of the tributaries, it's almost 1.6.
This level is dangerously high, 100 times the amount considered safe by the World Health Organization. Compared with other locations Lorena has tested, the Camarones Valley contains the highest levels of arsenic in the area.
And if that was the case, do you think that the people in the past were also affected by chronic arsenic poisoning?
The possibility is there. That's what we now have to prove.
Lorena's analysis has confirmed that the Chinchorro people were living in an environment laced with highly dangerous levels of arsenic. But there's still no conclusive proof that they were taking arsenic into their bodies. The crucial evidence could come from the hair samples sent to Professor Dula Amara Siriwardena in Massachusetts. He has been sent strands of hair from the modern inhabitants of the Camarones Valley and from 6 of the ancient mummies. Using cutting-edge technology, he hopes to determine whether any arsenic is present. He begins with the modern cases. As the laser scoops out a microscopic sample from the hair, his scopes show a clear spike in the level of arsenic, marked out in red on the graph. This is confirmation that modern-day inhabitants have absorbed the deadly arsenic from the water and plants in their environment. The ancient hairs were more brittle, but after careful cleaning, they also produced some fascinating results.
When we analyze these samples, voila, we got this huge arsenic signals in certain samples, and the levels are from anything like 0.25 parts per million to go up to 12 parts per million, the 6 samples we analyzed. So we can really see that we can detect elevated levels of arsenic. And so that was a very exciting thing.
The team will need to test a larger group of samples before they can be absolutely certain of their findings. But the early signs appear to support Bernardo's theory that arsenic poisoning was a dangerous reality for the ancient Chinchorro people. It now seems likely that the mothers would have experienced the trauma of repeated miscarriages and stillbirths. This, in turn, could have triggered the ritual response of artificial mummification.
You need to imagine having these females, these mothers and parents, having one lost child after another. So perhaps in that way, artificial mummification developed as a way to assuage their grief, as a way to keep their little babies, their newborns, with them. It was an emotional response to the loss of their beloved children.
The team's investigation has shown that the danger of arsenic poisoning has existed for thousands of years. The arrival of freshly piped water is reducing its impact on the villagers in Camarones, but inhabitants of more remote areas of northern Chile are still under threat. Lorena Cornejo and her team are now embarking on an education program, teaching a simple method of extracting arsenic from river water.
This technology is simple and economical and gives you water that's safe to drink.
All they need is a plastic bottle, some lemon juice, iron, and 6 hours in the sunshine. A chemical reaction produces a sediment which can then be filtered out, leaving the water almost entirely arsenic-free.
It's very cheap for the people who don't have much money and who live far away in places that are difficult for water tankers to get to.
millions of people around the world still face this same health crisis. For Professor Amara Siriwardena, these ancient samples could be of vital importance in the search for a modern solution.
So we're going to learn lots from these mummies, and we can extrapolate these same ideas into modern day populations. So it's an old problem still remaining with us. So the outcome of this main project is, we can learn from the past.
Today's inhabitants are linked to their ancient ancestors by the common threat of poison hidden in the landscape, arsenic. Chinchorro mummification was a way to cope with the mystery of death. Today, research into this ancient practice is helping us to understand a danger still haunting the world today.